Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to Talk Like a Leader. This week's episode is titled The Impact of Relationship, Message, and Context. If you've listened to very many episodes of Talk Like a Leader, you probably pick up on the idea that I am more interested in talking about the principles of effective communication than I am about the techniques. And I'm reminded of a quote that I got many years ago. I actually don't even remember where I got this from. And the statement is, techniques are many, principles are few. Techniques often vary, principles never do. The point is this: the foundational principles that make communication work across all different elements of communication, not just in one specific application. And while it's helpful to learn communication techniques, I recommend having some go-to techniques in your repertoire. Effective communicators look beyond techniques to understand the principles that make the technique work. Because if you know the principle that makes the technique work, then you can adjust when the technique doesn't work. Because you can identify what caused the technique to fail in the specific circumstance. So here are three critical elements to consider, to take into account as you adjust your approach in not just leadership communication, really in all communication. The three things to consider are relationship, message, and context. So let's define what each of those means and how they affect the way you communicate with other people. The relationship element to consider is the nature, quality, depth, and history of your relationship with the other person. It hinges on what the other person believes about your intentions, meaning do they believe that what you're communicating or how you're communicating is intended to harm them or to help them. And that's related to relationship. It's tied to their belief about your intent or intentions. Relationship is connected to the power dynamic between you and them. Are you a peer? Are you in a power position relative to them? Are they in a power position relative to you? Each of those is a slightly different dynamic, and each of those carries a little bit different consideration in terms of how you approach people, the level of formality you need to use, the amount of respect or deference you need to give to the other person, or how much they might feel like they have to give to you. So relationship affects the specific technique, even though the principles of effective communication remain the same. Another element to consider when you're crafting a communication is the type of message. And this would be like, is it more of a positive or negative message? Is it encouraging or discouraging? A negative message probably takes a lot more consideration and thought to deliver delicately than a positive message does. A potentially discouraging message needs to be more carefully handled than an encouraging message. And you could probably choose bad words and turn an encouraging message into a discouraging one, or a positive message into a negative one, because you didn't fully understand how that message was going to land or how it was going to be heard by the other person. So message is really related to the content of the message. And then context is related to the environment or the way the message is delivered. Is this a public or private communication? You'll need to be much more careful in your tone and body language and word choice in public than you are in private, because there'll be different levels of psychological safety or threat for the other person. Is this a written or spoken communication? Again, written communication tends to have a slightly more threatening feel to it than spoken communication does, so it calls for different level of sensitivity and awareness to how this message is going to land. Is this communication in person or remote? Are we communicating through some technology like a phone or a video call, or are we in person? Each of these contexts carries a different level of awareness and sensitivity to how the message is going to land. So as you listen to communication techniques, always keep in mind that any particular technique probably only applies in a circumstance or maybe in a limited number of circumstances where the relationship, the message, and the context all align. When you hear examples of communication techniques or when you've had success in communication and a technique works, consider what environment that communication happened in. What was the combination of relationship, message, and context that made it work? And really, what is the principle that was at play in that situation? Not the specific word choice, not the specific tone. What's the principle that made it work? And then filter that through relationship, message, and context when you need to deliver it to a person who has a different relationship with you, or who might hear the message differently, or the context would be different. Wise leaders recognize that simplifying communication to a bucket of techniques or a toolbox of techniques is really not the way to go forward. Techniques are good to learn, and techniques often apply only in a very limited circumstance or limited number of circumstances where the relationship, message, and context make the technique work. To be a truly effective communicator, focus more on the principles of communication so that you can adjust to each variation or change in relationship, message, and context that you face. If you can remember to focus on the principles over the techniques, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.